Hello, BookTube. It's a melancholy occasion, of course. It's the last mail haul of the week. But I'm determined not to let the video be melancholy because of the melancholy nature of our last video. That would be asking a little much of you to get you down in the dumps right along with me. I have stayed away from the news and from most social media. I've even stayed away from the internet for most of today. Just spent the whole day with the puppy. Out on walks and playing here in the apartment and reading when she was sleeping. One of our walks, our walk this afternoon, had a hilarious moment. Frida's an extremely friendly little dog, but she's also a very orderly little terrier. And when she sees things that are moving, she screams at them to stop and pay her attention, whether it's dogs or dried leaves or bugs or humans. And I've just got into the habit of smiling when she does that, so that the human knows that the little dog that's screaming and growling at them is actually friendly. And we encountered today a wedding at a church. So the wedding was about to start. All the bridesmaids and were lined up on the steps of the church outside, ready to go in. And the service can't have been more than minutes away. And when Frida saw all that activity, that human activity that wasn't directed at her, she screamed her head off at them, doing her thing where she stands up on her hind legs, screaming and crying. You have to hear it to believe it. An infernal caterwauling, whose translation is easy for even a tone-deaf human to figure out, which is "come and pet me." And the bridesmaids all thought she was cute. They were all looking down the steps of the church at her and smiling, and all the men in the party were looking down at the church steps and smiling at her. And I was trying to get her to come along because they obviously had something more important to do, when the pastor came out the door of the church and started coming down the stairs. Obviously he was coming outside to give the troops one final inspection. And he got to the bottom. He got to the end of the line, which brought him only a few feet away from my little puppy, who was still going nuts. And he turned and looked at us, this enormous guy, built like a linebacker, a bald head, gray beard, tailored gray suit. And I thought, okay, this is really bad because she's distracting the whole bridal party, so we're going to get chewed out. Instead, he beamed from ear to ear, and he looked back at the rest of the party on the stairs and said, "What's wrong with you people? Can't you see this child needs love?" And he came down the last two steps, walked over, and just embraced Frida down like a landslide coming down her. And she couldn't have been happier. It was wonderful. He embraced, he let her jump all over him, he let her kiss his face, and then when she was perfectly satisfied, he got back up, straightened out his suit, and turned back to the party. He didn't even seem to expect that I would thank him, but I've never been so grateful. It was a wonderful moment. But that's been the bulk of my day. I have intentionally avoided, I've taken the wise decision of intentionally avoiding things that will annoy me to no purpose today. I've intentionally, in other words, avoided letting the internet wind me up. So it's been a good day, and I intend to keep that tone straight through this video, even though this is the final mail haul of the week. And that's bad, because that puts us at the eve of a bleak and barren Sunday in which there will be no books. But we have books to talk about now, and that's fun. It's fun not only to get them, but to share them with you. So let's see what we have and what's of interest. It's a fairly good-sized mail haul, and it ends with a box. So, oh, great, okay, fantastic. This is, I think we might have seen this before on this channel. This is due in the fall, I think. Yes, November. Boy, we're getting closer and closer to a 2019 book. Oh my. This is by H.W. Brands, a fantastic historian and biographer, and this is Heirs to the Founders. This is Henry Clay, John Calhoun, and Daniel Webster, the three biggest names in the amazing, really stellar, post-Founding Fathers generation of American, figureheads. And they were, some of you who like American history, make a study of American history, will remember a great book on this same subject called The Great Triumvirate from about 50 years ago. I would ordinarily just warn a historian off a subject that have been done so perfectly. But with Brands, I'm willing to give it a try. I'm willing to see what he has to say. I mean, 50 years is a long time for new records, for the interesting reevaluation of old records. And there's also, the author's sensibility, which is the ultimate X factor. The only thing, this comes out in November, the only thing I'm curious about, I've mentioned this before, the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston is a great old used bookstore that has everything. They have massive amounts of stock turnover, so you see things there all the time. I don't go there every day the way I used to, but I still go when I can. The problem is that the Brattle, with all of its bounty of books, can't outbid a day like the one I spent today. Nothing can. So I'm going to have to, if I'm going to resume something closer to my normal real-world life, I'm going to have to make some hard decisions, but I'm going to put them off. But anyway, something I mentioned about the Brattle is the synchronicity of the Brattle that has no rhyme or reason, and that almost always throws up a book that I am thinking about in my path when I'm thinking about it. I don't know how that happens. It must just be the sheer size of their buying. But I don't currently have a copy of The Great Triumvirate, and I'm going to want to read it before I read this. And I guarantee you, I can pretty much guarantee you that a hardcover dust-jacketed copy of The Great Triumvirate will show up at the Brattle sale lot sometime between now and when I set down to read this in early November. I don't know how that'll happen, but I feel certain that it will. It's a great subject to study, really. It's a period of American history that Americans don't know as well as they should. Okay, what is this next one? Oh. Okay. All right. This comes out in October. I didn't request it. Sure is a pretty looking thing. Jeez. It's by Teresa Ann Fowler, and it's called A Well-Behaved Woman. It's a novel of the Vanderbilts. I'm not used to American cover designs being so effective. That is very nice. Wow, okay. Well, let's see here. So let's see. Let's see if we can hold this up here. She wrote the novel Z, about Zelda Fitzgerald. Okay, I read that. Let's see here. So the follow-up to that breakout success tackles another woman history remembers through a patriarchal lens, Alva Vanderbilt Belmont, better known as an extravagant socialite of New York's Gilded Age. In Fowler's hands, we learn Alva was a whip-smart renegade who fought tirelessly for women's suffrage, was one of the founders of the National Women's Party, and was deeply involved in building some of New York's grand houses. She divorced a powerful Vanderbilt who cheated on her endlessly and later married for love. Okay. I have never read a biography of Alva Vanderbilt, and I don't think I've ever read a novel in which she's anything but a tangential character, so this is brand new ground for me. Wonderful. Okay. Alright, great. So I read Z, and I kind of liked it, but I thought it was a little dutiful, and now looking back, I'm wondering if I didn't think that because I read Nancy Mitford's great biography of Zelda Fitzgerald called Zelda, that is one of those biographies that's so good that, as I mentioned the other day about E.M. Forster, it's one of those biographies that's so good that no novel can beat it. And I don't know. Maybe that's another thing that we have to chalk up to Brattle's synchronicity, because I don't have a copy of Zelda either. So maybe I need to reread that. I'm putting a lot of stress on the Brattle. They can handle it, though. All right, so what do we got here next? Oh, okay, great. We have a cover sheet? No. This is a little novel by Laird Hunt, who is the author of The Evening Road, Never Home, and I thought he wrote something that I knew a little better than that. Oh yeah, he also wrote Indiana. That's the one that I know by him. This is In the House in the Dark of the Woods. A beautiful cover design, disastrous title. I stress once again to publishers near and far that my services for titling anything are available to you 24 hours a day for free. So that we don't have Three prepositional phrases is the title of a book. So, but anyway, I don't have a pub sheet for this. Let's do this the SFF 180 way and see if it works for me. In this literary horror story set in colonial New England, a woman goes missing, or not missing. Perhaps she's fled, abandoning her family. Or perhaps she's been kidnapped and set loose to wander in the dense woods of the north. Alone and possibly lost, she meets another woman in the forest. Then everything changes. And I requested this because I'm kind of sort of a fan of Laird Hunt, although this, now that I read the full plot of this, it worries me. Of course it worries me. It worries me because horror, like science fiction, Margaret Atwood, tends to invite dabblers, and that's usually ends up being insulting. The writing effective horror is more than just having creepy things happen, just like writing effective science fiction is more than just changing one item in 2018 and calling it a dystopia. So I'm cautiously optimistic. We'll see. We'll see. I've seen a lot of when literary authors, quote unquote literary authors, go into genres like horror or science fiction, especially, is the worst offender. What is Cormac McCarthy doing, writing a dystopian novel? I ask you. Anyway, well, usually when they tend to do it, the results aren't pretty. So we shall see. I'm hoping that this is long on literary and short on the horror. Okay, what is this next one? This is Harvard University Press. This comes out in the fall. Yes, September. This is Our American Israel. Story of an entangled alliance. Okay. The United States has given more monetary aid to Israel than to any other nation. Modern nation. It regularly issues vetoes on behalf of the United Nations. It just did, just the other day, on the killing of, I don't even know how many dozens of Palestinians on the day that the announcement was made of the moving of the capital to Jerusalem. The United Nations immediately put forward, nations of the United Nations immediately put forward a motion to investigate the killing of all those civilians, and the United States quashed it immediately. And just last month, President Trump risked backlash abroad by rubber-stamping the opening of a brand-new American embassy in Jerusalem as protests raged across the border. The phrase special relationship has rarely been more apt, but it applies to America and Britain, not to America and Israel. Amy Kaplan examines the American perceptions of Israel as well as its citizens' understanding of this seemingly unbreakable bond. Her book delves into the history of cultural narratives presented in the news media, literature, and up on the screen, and shows how a shared identity emerged as Americans sought to make Israel their own, projecting their desires, anxieties, fantasies, values, and creation myths onto a modern state. How, Kaplan asks, was the creation of a Jewish state in the Middle East translated into a narrative that reflected cherished American tales of national origins? How, in other words, did so many come to feel that the bond between the United States and Israel was historically inevitable, morally right, and a matter of common sense? Okay, all right, we're dancing around. There's a gigantic gorilla sitting in the corner of the room, and we're dancing around it. Let's see if we have one more paragraph to go here. And then, for many Americans, Israel has become a shiny replica of the United States thousands of miles from home. An idealistic nation of immigrants sheltered from persecution abroad. Over the years, this cultural construction seeped into and shaped political discourse, yet has come under increasing scrutiny. Kaplan recounts the shifting rhetoric of this evolving narrative and highlights the damage done by the 1982 invasion of Lebanon to the popular perception of Israel as an invincible victim. This event, which shattered the popular consensus and triggered a crisis of perception, introduced the kinds of polarized discourse that frames debate about Israel and Palestine today. Okay. All right. This is a touchy subject. It's a very, very vexed subject. I hardly find two people who agree on it. And I love reading about it. I really do. I think it often brings out both the best and the worst in writers who write about it. So who is Amy Kaplan when she's at home? She's professor of English at the University of Pennsylvania and the author of The Social Construction of American Realism. Okay. Well, Um, okay, well, you know, we have a pub sheet, so the book could be anything. The pub sheet goes into a great deal of detail about the fervor with which many Americans support Israel without mentioning religion, without mentioning specifically Christian revelation about the necessary requirements to bring on the apocalypse. I guess maybe that'd be heady stuff for a pub sheet, but I'm hoping that the author mentions it. I don't know of. I know a whole bunch of active, practicing, believing Christians. I know a whole bunch of Christian fundamentals, and I don't know one of them that thinks of Israel as a kind of America over the ocean. They champion it for one reason only, and it has nothing to do with the well-being of Israelis. but I'll leave it to the expert to teach me. So this comes out in the fall. All of these, I think, are going to come out in the fall. So I will read up. I read everything on the subject of Israel and Palestine, and Israel's relationship with America, and all that sort of stuff. I read all of it, even though it's angst-producing. Not an easy subject at all. Now here we have an easy subject. A totally congenial subject. Oh my. Okay, great. This is... I don't even need to read the pub sheet for it. It is a common book. It is a kind of book that is produced often. We saw one on this channel just a few months ago. Here's the latest one by a very, very best-selling author. This is The Library Book by Susan Orlean. And it's about libraries. The wonder of them, the joy of them, the history of them, something of their future. Weaving together her lifelong love of books and reading with a fascinating history of libraries and sometimes eccentric characters who run them. Yeah, libraries are run by eccentric characters. Award-winning journalist and New York Times best-selling author Susan Orlean presents a mesmerizing and uniquely complex story as only she can. I have a librarian in mind to review this for Open Letters Review when the time comes. But that's great. And it's also, it's got the advanced copy has in addition to the gold gilting and the decal edges, it has a kind of a textured feel. I have a strong suspicion that in the fall, when this book actually comes to bookstores, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be the kind of little thing that is clearly meant to be something that you can buy and give to anybody. Anybody that loves libraries. And if somebody doesn't love libraries, you shouldn't be giving them presents of any kind, much less books. Anyway, let's move on. Oh, that's great to have that. That's fantastic. I would very much like to review it for a huge audience. So, okay. Okay, I didn't request this. This is a novel by Bragi Olafsson, translated from the Icelandic by Lytton Smith. Do any of you who are in Iceland know Bragi Olafsson? The author of two books. The other two books in English translation are The Ambassador and The Pets. And this was originally published in 2015 and is now being brought out by Open Letter, which is not Open Letters. They're a publishing arm of translated literature. They are not Open Letters, the literary journal, where I am an editor. On a rainy day in the middle of June, on the day England and Costa Rica meet in the World Cup, G, a 35-year-old aspiring writer, is waiting in line at the post office to mail off a manuscript, a story about a day in the life of a 35-year-old man. That's when he notices a man he knows, or rather knew, sort of knew. A man who used to go out with a girl G loved from afar, the only girl he's ever loved. All his hatred of this man comes rushing back, including his foolish wish that the man would die, and he takes off, following him through the streets of Reykjavik. This strange game of cat and mouse takes some dark turns though evolving into complex, introspective journey of a man struggling to complete the unfinished narrative of his own life. And it's called The Narrator. Okay, that sounds kind of interesting. And somebody named Ingi Freyr. I love the Icelandic people. The narrator is clever in so many ways and utterly strange, funny, and wonderfully entertaining. So this comes out in mid-August. Okay. I kind of like that plot description. I can't read this in Icelandic. I'm going to have to rely on the translation. I like the plot description where you know, that sort of thing has very strong comedic potential. We shall see. Translated literature. I have actually done it a couple of times. I don't do it anymore now that I have. First, I had sick dogs, and then now I have a puppy that I adore. But once in a while, years and years ago, I used to try that experiment. You couldn't do it now, of course, with surveillance cameras on every traffic stop and drones watching everything that everyone does in every street and every minute of every day in America. But before the internet, before technology, I used to sometimes, when I had time at liberty, do the experiment of following someone, of picking a random stranger in a crowd and just seeing where they go. It's kind of a surreal pleasure, provided you don't get too close or too creepy, and provided you knock it off after a certain amount of time. But allowing someone else to dictate where you go like that, I always found it fascinating, and also a nice little window into the experience that every dog on a leash feels, where they know where they want to go, but they're not in control of where they go. But I never hated anyone that I followed. I never knew anyone that I followed. And it sounds like the narrator didn't know the girl either. Just loved her from afar. So I don't know. This is intriguing. August. I'll probably not put that off for very long. And then we have lots of cardboard. And then we end with a box. So we'll see what the first cardboard. Cardboard probably means finished copies. Okay. All right. This is a Sean Stranahan mystery. This is by Keith McCaffrey, and it is A Death in Eden, with the American West there and a requisite rattlesnake. Here we go. There's the rattlesnake, practically asking, "Where is Steve?" I guess I've been zapped by so many of them I've lost count. They're extremely aggressive creatures. No matter what anyone tells you, they are extremely aggressive creatures. They are, when you hear a trail guide or whatever spin you some yarn about how they mainly just want to avoid you. If they rattle, it's because they want to ward you off, not attack you. Now that trail guide is trying to sell the park and the experience, but I've had a lot of experience with rattlesnakes and, oh my God, with cobras and vipers. And any big snake that has extremely potent venom is, I think, connectedly also extremely aggressive. So my advice is to stay home and read. So this is the 7th novel in the Sean Stranahan mystery series. I think I've read a couple of them and liked them. The author once again crafts his signature blend of vivid natural imagery, grisly violence, gripping plotting, and wry humor that has earned him the praise of critics and a rapidly devoted fan base. In Death in Eden, scarecrows are appearing in the cliffs above Montana's Smith River, and state investigator Harold Littlefeather is enlisted to find the culprit behind the menacing effigies. Someone's putting up scarecrows. On the surface, the incidents appear related to a copper mining project that threatens the purity of the river, but Harold's investigation takes an ominous turn when a decapitated body is found in the park. At the same time, Sean Stranahan and Rainbow Sam Meslick, I think I remember these characters, I think I'd read a couple of these, have been contracted as guides to float a party down the Smith, which includes Clint McCain, a lawyer and spokesman for the mine project, Bart Trueblood, the president of Save the Smith, a grassroots organization devoted to stopping the project, and a documentarian filming the whole thing. Both men grew up on the river on neighboring ranches, and as they travel farther downstream, it's revealed that the two share a past that runs much deeper and darker than their opposing viewpoints. And they're on a raft. So bad stuff is bound to happen. All right, so this comes out soon, I assume? Yes, this comes out in early July. A murder mystery. I love murder mysteries, so I'm on board. I didn't get an advance copy of it. So. All right, let's see what's next here. I think we're probably going to have a parade of finished copies here, and who knows what'll be in the box. It's from W.W. Norton, which is my favorite publisher, so it could be a squealer. Okay, this is also due in early July. This is Rip the Angels from Heaven by David Krugler, the author of, this is the thrilling sequel to a book called The Dead Don't Bleed. And it stars intelligence officer Ellis Voigt, fighting to prevent the Soviets from infiltrating the Manhattan Project while running from enemies on both sides. think we saw The Dead Don't Bleed. I think I read it. No, I didn't. I read a little of The Dead Don't Bleed and then got distracted. But I did not because of the fault of the book. So I'm just going to go at this one. I'll go at this one right away. Washington, D.C., 1945. Lieutenant Ellis Voigt of the Office of Naval Intelligence is desperate to keep the secrets that threaten his life. The war overseas is going well for America, but Voigt can't escape a web of double agents and undercover spies who follow his every move. The FBI suspect he's a committed communist who murdered a naval officer in Washington back alley. The Soviets believe he's holding back information from their contacts, and they're willing to use any means necessary to extract it. When Voigt is sent to New Mexico on a secret mission to identify a Soviet spy, he's tailed by both the FBI and the Russians, and is running out of people he can trust. As the team at Los Alamos prepares to test an atomic bomb in the desert, Voigt faces the dilemma he's been trying to avoid. Can he stop the Soviets from getting the bomb, or can he save himself? But he might not be able to do both. This sounds awful familiar. Sounds really good, too. And you just know with a premise like that the payoff climactic scene will involve the explosion, will involve the bomb going off. I don't know how. But now I have two murder mysteries that I really want to read right away, and it's almost the middle of June. I can surely justify. These things come out in 2 weeks, if they're not out already. If they don't follow strict embargo dates, they might be in bookstores now. So I can justify reading these tonight. Okay, so this is the next one. Oh God, help us. Okay, all right. That sense of fun and games that you had with all those fun murder mysteries, get that out of your system. Okay, this is due any day now, and this is Marx's Dream: From Capitalism to Communism by Tom Rockmore. 2 centuries after his birth. Has it been that short a time? Karl Marx is read almost solely through the lens of Marxism. His works examine for how they fit into the doctrine that was developed from his death. With Marx's Dream, Tom Rockmore offers a much-needed alternative view, distinguishing rigorously between Marx and Marxism. That's good, because I read when Penguin Classics came out with the huge paperback, multi-volume Capital. I read it. I read the whole thing, and I went into it expecting exactly what we just heard. I went into it expecting a Marxism founding document. Instead, it's a marvelous reading experience, wide-ranging, literary. I didn't expect it to be full of literary allusions, full of... there's even a kind of, admittedly leaden, but still effective wit that winkles here and there in certain pages. I wish that I had those Penguin Classic Marx Capitals. I don't anymore. I don't know where they went, and none of you are sending me photos on my phone of the penguins that you encounter in your used book expeditions. I want them all, but you won't send me photos because I smell. Anywho, analyzing Marx's huge corpus. Rockmore outlines Marx's theory of practice and identifies its origins in Greek philosophy's emphasis on the practical dimensions of philosophy and on the question of what kind of society is most conducive to human flourishing. And I discovered all kinds of things like that, all kinds of deep pilings in philosophy and classical literature and literary history and history itself in the work that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting to find them there. So this might be interesting. It won't be interesting as dead bodies. But it also has to be read right away because it's out already, I think. Let's see what this next big one is here. It's a great big thing. Oh, okay. Trust Viking, never let you down. Okay, this is a thing. I don't think I ever got an advanced copy of this. This is we're back to having fun. This is due any day now, if I remember correctly. This is due any day. Oh, okay, it's due in early July, same as the others. This is it's by John Ross, and it's a great big book about John Wesley Powell and his exploration of the American West. This is The Promise of the Grand Canyon. Let's see here. When meteorologists recently discovered with some alarm that America's arid western climate is marching steadily eastward, they did so by revisiting a groundbreaking concept put forward 140 years ago by the audacious American explorer and scientist John Wesley Powell drew a longitudinal line. Oops. Oh, there we go. He drew a longitudinal line splitting the map of America in half, and in doing so fired the first volley in the climate change wars. Stunning in its simplicity, yet revolutionary in its implication, the map separated the arid West from the fertile East, and would usher in the new ideas about land sustainability, climate change, and water management. Although congressmen and Western boosters would shut Powell down, his idea would percolate, and 6 generations later would not only appear prescient, but wise as well. Any big new book about John Wesley Powell is fine by me. That's wonderful. Okay. Okay, so this is also early July, so this is also something I need to get to right away. Wow. Okay. Great. I wonder how much of it will be John Wesley Powell and how much of it won't be. I'm hoping that it's mostly just a study of him. But anyway, let's move on. So this is our last thing. This is a long mail haul. This is our last thing. It's a box. We'll see what we have here. We'll see if it causes Steve to squeal. I don't think it will, but there's always a chance. What have we got here? Oh, this mess I'm making. Oh, great. Okay. Fantastic. This also comes out in early July. Good Lord. Okay, July's shelf just got enormous. We saw this already. This is Julio Crespo McLennan. This is Europa. How Europe shaped the modern world. And this is the bright red finished copy. We saw this before, and I've had the advanced copy on the shelf for a while. I haven't got to it. So now I have to put some serious time into redoing the July shelf. Good Lord. All right, so there we go. So we have Europa. This is going to be a big Steve pile. This is a nice mail haul. This is Europa. These quite a few of these are going to be in your bookstore any day now. So if they, or at your library. So if they struck your fancy, you'll know to make a note and go looking. Not all of these are long in the advance copies. The thing was split down the middle between books that come out in the autumn and books that are out right around the corner. So we have Europa. We have The Promise of the Grand Canyon about John Wesley Hardin, and we have Marx's Dream about what Karl Marx actually wrote and what it actually says. That's interesting. Then Rip the Angels from Heaven. NSI operator on the run from both his own people and the Russians, right in the shadow of the detonation of the first nuclear bomb in Los Alamos. Then A Death in Eden in Colorado, snake-infested Colorado. Let me see here. Then Narrator by Bragi Olufsen, about a man who sees another man at random in the post office and decides to follow him around town. then the library book by Susan Orlean, which I predict might not get reviewed everywhere, but it's going to sell like hotcakes this Christmas. Our American Israel, the latest book about the Marxist problem in Israel. Let's see here. A Well-Behaved Woman, about Alma Vanderbilt, first historical novel I've ever read about her. Heirs of the Founders, about the Great Triumvirate, by a fantastic historian. And In the House, in the Dark, of the Woods, at the Beginning of the Day, etc., etc. In the House, in the Dark, of the Woods, by Laird Hunt. Modern horror novel about 2 mysterious women who meet in the woods. So there you go. That is our last mail haul of the week. Good Lord, that was a lot of mail. So I'm gonna go and ruffle through it. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.